Final Fantasy is the most iconic RPG series of all time, and it's evolved into a massive franchise that spans an incredible amount of games. Despite many other entries in the series being more popular, Final Fantasy 1 on the NES has a dedicated community in both the casual and speedrunning spaces. Since the first documented Japanese runs reported on Ultima Garden back in 2007, the game has evolved in a way that no one could have ever expected. 19 years later, these evolutions came to a head on February 27th of 2026, with a runner by the name of Shane Zell coming close to breaking the game's legendary 2-hour barrier. He achieved a 2-hour and 22-second run in FF1 NES's any % category, and he's about to break that barrier any day now. The last time an hour barrier was broken in this category was way back in 2017 by Geyer, and ever since then the game has gone through a complete transformation. The run has went from an RNG nightmare to requiring nearly 2 hours of perfect inputs, letting runners bend the game to its will. This brought the record all the way down to just over 2 hours in 2024, but some recent discoveries have introduced new strategies and a new route as a result. Today, let's dive into the speedrun and how it all works, along with the discoveries and tools used by Shane in his recent records. Stay hydrated, my friends, and I hope you all are having an amazing day. To appreciate how impressive this new record by Shane is, we need to understand what it takes to speedrun FF1 in the first place. This run is much like a casual playthrough of FF1, where you play as 4 warriors of light, trying to restore the elemental crystals by defeating the 4 fiends: Lich, the fiend of earth; Carrie, the fiend of fire; Kraken, the fiend of water; and finally Tiamat, the fiend of wind. After these all are defeated, you go 2,000 years in the past to beat the true villain of the game, Chaos. Beating the game fast back in the day involved using 2 fighters and 2 black mages for good offensive coverage. Other classes weren't needed since runners could manage their healing via items as long as they had good luck on boss fights. Speedruns also did the side quests for the job upgrades from Bahamut. Even though it was slow, it gave runners a huge power boost to get through the rest of the game. Overall, the run came down to getting good encounter luck, preparing the party with proper equipment, and hoping you didn't die to bosses. You can also get blocked by NPCs in this game, specifically the notorious bats in the Earth Cave before fighting the Lich. For no reason at all, you can be on the best pace of your life and lose a run to having to wait for one of these little guys to let you pass. Up until 2019, this was how the community approached FF1 speedrunning. That is until a veteran FF1 runner named Fcoughlin talked about the idea of Manip with another runner named Fcoughlin. Thanks to Fcoughlin's ideas for the route, a GameFAQs guide on the game mechanics and code by Astral Esper, and finally the years of work done by many community members, the first manipulated runs were born. Putting it simply, manipulated runs set up the game's battle RNG to be at a flush state in the beginning of the run. This is done by checking an encounter outside of Corneria and progressing the battle RNG values until things like damage numbers match what runners have routed out. Progression of battle RNG happens on every 2 frames the character menu is active, and runners use a clever method called bouncing to progress RNG in very specific increments. By pressing the B button while on the first character, you close the menu and cause that character to bounce. Holding this button lets you do it continuously by buffering inputs on the first possible frame they can be entered, letting you control how RNG progresses. The same thing can be done with the A button, allowing for runners to buffer attacks as well. By killing off all characters except the main one, this sped up the run overall, and let runners have even better control over battle RNG. All of this, combined with an exact step route, ensured that the entire run's encounters and damage outcomes could be manipulated if runners played perfectly. After a ton of research into the manipulation and routes, Fcoughlin got an incredible time of 2:34:43 on February 15th of 2020, and this would only improve as this new manipulation sparked an incredible trade of records between him and veteran speedrunner Ness Cardinality. Over the next year and a half, the time was pushed down to a 2:05:55 on November 28th of 2021, thanks to all the manip routing, reducing the amount of encounters obtained throughout the run, and other minor optimizations. Fcoughlin did multiple reroutes of the manipulation during this era, including huge time saves like skipping the entire Bahamut side quest in the middle of the game. This led to several minutes being saved from that alone, but there were other cool strategies in addition to that one. Another one of these was implementing the use of Bane an instant kill effect which bosses are normally immune to. However, in FF1, there's an invulnerability bug that gives you a 3 out of 256 chance to inflict status effects against any boss. The reason this works is because of how the game handles status hit success. When trying to inflict a status, the game generates a random number between 0 and 200. There's also another number generated that's derived from the enemy's magic defense. But if the enemy is immune to a status, then that number is always 0. In order to land a status effect, your random number needs to be less than or equal to the enemy's number that was generated. Given that there's 3 different RNG values in every 256 cycle that will give you a 0, that's your chance of hitting the Bane Sword. Sometimes the route requires runners to line up RNG to get the Bane Sword kill on a boss, whether it be faster than a normal fight or to plan out better encounters later on. The problem with this is runners use the Bane Sword to cast Bane, and this means navigating to the items menu and using that item. There's no way to buffer the inputs to the menu, so there's an element of frame-perfect inputs towards the end of a 2-hour run. Fcoughlin's route required 2 Banes in the final dungeon, one against the Tiamat refight, and the second against Chaos. The way he handled that was with an audio cue he'd listened for after navigating to the Bane Sword. Things like this created a massive barrier to entry for the manipulated run, so it made sense that Fcoughlin's record would sit for over 2 years. That is until Shane Zell picked up the category and eventually grabbed the record with the 2:05:24 on January 9th of 2024. Shane got into running FF1 back in 2017 and ran different releases of the game leading up to him getting the no manipulation record back in 2021. After working on different challenge runs, he worked with Fcoughlin to learn his manip route. Shane would eventually take on a different approach though, using visual cues for the canal glitch and Bane Swords near the end of the run, as that was more consistent for him. However, Shane quickly realized that there was more time saved as long as he was willing to play more risky. There were 2 other in-game bosses he wanted to use the Bane Sword on, such as Tiamat 1 and the Kraken refight. Since these fights take several turns to complete, it made sense that Shane wanted to cut time here. Even though the times set by Fcoughlin and Shane were really good, they both understood that there was a lot of time to save with the run. Part of this was due to using something I mentioned just a minute ago called the canal glitch. Encounters in this version of FF1 are determined from a set table, with every step that's taken determining your value in that table. If that value is higher than the area's encounter threshold, then you get into an encounter. There's one spot in the overworld where this rule is broken though, and it's in this weird spot in the ocean. If you run your ship into this tile against the landmass, you don't physically move, but your encounter RNG progresses ridiculously fast. You also can't get into any encounters while this is happening, so it's the perfect way to control what fights you get for the rest of the run without burning a lot of steps in between. The only problem with this is you not only have to go out of your way to perform this glitch, but you're also flying blind. Runners need some type of cue to ensure they don't progress RNG too far, since they can't see the value in runs, and hope they come close to where they want to be. This is fairly inconsistent, and doing the glitch loses 20 to 30 seconds, which is a lifetime in a run as highly optimized as this one. There was potential for other reroutes, but at the time, this involved checking RNG from encounter to encounter and manually testing if something worked. Since each change in outcomes affects how the rest of the run is handled, this takes a ridiculous amount of time, and since there wasn't anything to quickly map out encounters in the entire game, all roads pretty much led to the canal glitch because it was so useful. Even the Bane Swords presented a bottleneck to routing since they were so late into the run, and a change from over an hour ago could mean you may not find the optimal RNG for a Bane hit in the reroute. However, this opened up a lot of opportunity for a new route since the focus wasn't on surviving multiple turns against late game bosses anymore. All of this deterred runners from coming up with something new to improve the record, but it wasn't long until someone would fix that, and that someone just happened to be one of Shane's best friends. A while back, Shane was talking about this with his friend No Heal for You, a software developer and speedrunner, and No Heal thought that he could create a tool to make routing that much easier. Given the game's code had been disassembled years ago in June of 2015, and the fact that Fcoughlin had already made routing scripts based off of this disassembly, something like this was very possible. It would take him a few months, but in January of 2026, No Heal cooked up something huge for Shane. His legally distinct web tool that is definitely not based off of Final Fantasy NES lets runners simulate routes and encounters. This was absolutely game-changing for Shane, and by the end of January, Shane was finally able to test new strategies without having to manually force everything without help. This eventually led him to finding a route that only took 176 encounters, compared to some that had around 200 in the past. On top of that, he was able to remove all instances of the canal glitch from the run, and he even came up with another clever strat as well. When it comes to battle RNG, it's held in the save RAM, so it persists between resets, but the encounter table and the steps related to it do not, meaning if you're able to power cycle your NES, you could reset your encounters. By routing in the use of tents, which let you save and reset when used, allowed Shane to prevent undesirable encounters in the run. All of this saved minutes compared to the last route, but there were other optimizations as well. Things like getting the cube from the robot in the waterfall without activating encounter trap tiles could save additional fights, but this caused another issue to pop up. Not walking into this room meant that you had to wait for the robot to talk to you, and this introduced another level of RNG to the segment, potentially wasting time there. Remember, even though most of the run is manipulated, NPCs are still a source of RNG and can end an attempt if runners are unlucky. Outside of this, Shane's new route had 5 reset points. One at the beginning that requires him to run away from an encounter with frame-perfect inputs, and the other 4 are from the Bane swords at the end. Besides that, in NPC luck, all Shane needs to do is follow his route perfectly to succeed. As of the writing of this video, both Shane and No Heel are exploring new ways to improve the Manip route, and it won't be long until the record goes down even further. Shane thinks that the time could go down to a 158 with near-perfect NPC luck, and with him doing attempts almost every day, it won't be long before that happens. Congratulations again to Shane on this amazing run, and if you all want to watch it and subscribe to his channel, I've linked the YouTube video in the description. Stay hydrated, folks, and thank you all so much for watching.